today we're talking about how to get press for your business. And I was saying earlier, I'm really excited to talk about this because, first of all, it's a question I get all the time. And I can give you some tips on how to do so, but I'm normally receiving pitches. So
Hmm.
I can say what I like, what I don't like, but I'm not sending them out as much. So I don't know all the ins and outs of what someone else would potentially offer as a solution. And that's why we have Sabina here. And before we officially get started, I do want to say if you ever have any questions about building your brand, about how to with your pricing, your pitching, anything, if you have a professional service business, I'm now on this new app called Intro where you can just ask me questions and I can answer them in as little as 15 minutes. And I had a lot of fun yesterday because this guy that I had a call with, he's starting this new service where he helps parents develop a more healthy relationship with their children, both mentally and physically. And with everything going on in the world, obviously, I think it's really important to have that mental part. And I was talking to him, and I'm glad I did because he was going to jump right into launching his product before pre-qualifying, before studying his audience, before forming partnerships that's going to help him grow his business a lot quicker. So that's what we're talking about when we book these sessions, just helping you avoid confusion, more or less compress time, and avoid making mistakes. It's fun for me. Hopefully, it's fun for the person booking the call too. But if you ever want to talk to me, and Meg, my assistant, will drop a link in that. It's called Intro, and perfect way to do it. So why would you want to talk to me? I'll introduce myself. My name is Terry Rice. I am a business development consultant, and that normally involves helping other entrepreneurs build their brand and revenue. Also, a staff writer on Entrepreneur Magazine and host of the upcoming podcast, Launch Your Business by Entrepreneur Magazine. And today we are joined by Sabina Hitchen. Sabina, I'm going to mess up your intro, so I'm going to have you do it yourself. Please go ahead.
I will gladly take it. Hey, everybody. First of all, glad to see you here, whether you're here live or listening to this later. We are psyched. I could talk about PR all day long, especially as it applies to small businesses. My full-time job, I'm a PR strategist, and I run an education platform and community called Press for Success, which is sort of like everything you need to do to run your PR as a small business besides the publicist. And a quickie background in me is I used to actually be a high school teacher, believe it or not. So I was a teacher. After that, I thought, I need my New York City chapter. So I left out of the Midwest, literally spur of the moment, totally unplanned, moved to New York City, fell into a publicity job where I was Googling what is PR the night before my job. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm over my head. A year later, I had an office. Shortly after that, I had a staff, and PR just was meant for me. And I tell you that only because, number one, it's important to remember, especially professionally speaking, like where you begin isn't always where you end up. So stop stressing out and overthinking. I was a high school teacher. Now I'm teaching people how to get publicity. I was working in Fashion Week in New York. I'm like, what am I doing here? I'm a history teacher. So you never know. But those two careers, education and publicity, basically got married. And that's what I do today is help entrepreneurs figure out how to get press. It's sort of like the democratization of press, and everything you need is my mission to give it to you. I saw in my education days how these tools change your life. And so now we're going to give it to you PR wise.
Awesome. I think we can all relate to Googling how to do your job the day before you start a business. So thank you for sharing that and normalizing it. But again, for everyone, just let us know where you're dialing in from. Again, I'm here in Brooklyn. We have Sabina in Maine, and we're talking about how to get press for your business. So I'll just ask a general question to get started with everyone. Yes or no, have you ever received press for your business? And by press, I mean any media outlet. It can be your local newspaper, it can be New York Times, whatever it is. But yes or no, have you ever received press for your business? And by the end of this talk, the goal is to have you all feeling comfortable doing so. And next time I ask you, you will all say yes.
Yes.
But Sabina, when we think about getting press for a business, I mean, I think people are just confused, right? They think they have to hire an expensive PR company. They think they have to have like a fancy website, all these cool photos, so on and so forth. But just initially, where do we get started if we want to get press for a business?
Okay, so and there's, first of all, it's like that's a huge question, right? But I'm going to break it down into some little micro things I want you to think about that isn't overwhelming, because it doesn't have to be, like Terry's saying. And before I dive in, though, I just want to say, like, remember, it's like swimming. Terry and I can talk about how to do it forever. You can like Google it, you can read it, you can watch classes. But if you don't get in the water, you're not going to learn how to swim. So as we're teaching you, remember that the best way to get press is also start to try to take action on the things you learn. And if you're bad at it, that's how we begin. And you get better and better as you execute it. But let's talk about the basics. So very first, like I want you to figure out what do you have to offer, right? And a little bit later, Terry and I are gonna get into some actual story angles that'll work, but like think of the things you need to get pressed for. Is it your product? Is it your service slash expertise? Do you have like expert tips to offer to the press? Do you have a fantastic story to offer to the press? These are the things you're going to have to offer. So you need to start thinking, what am I sharing? Because just saying I'm a small business owner or I'm an entrepreneur is not an offer to the press. So start thinking, what am I offering? That's the first thing. And the second thing I want you to ask yourself is like, where do I belong, right? Where does my expertise, where does my story, where does my product belong in the press? These are jobs you have to accomplish, or you will be hiring someone and you don't have to. So you have to start doing the work. Where do I belong? What magazines do I belong on? What podcasts? What .coms? What TV shows? Start sourcing those and putting those somewhere like an Excel spreadsheet or something, right? These are like the foundational things all of you can begin doing. And Terry said he wants you to start being confident to say like, I can do it. And the next time we chat, you'll be like, I did it. One of those first things is like creating that spreadsheet where you can start building a media list of homes for your story or your product or your expert tips. But if it doesn't exist to me in like a spreadsheet or on paper, it doesn't exist, right? And as you start building a media list, like the list appears, because that's just algorithms. You start researching people on LinkedIn, LinkedIn's going to feed you more people. You start doing it on Instagram, they're going to feed you more people. Start finding those homes and then finding the people who cover things like you in those homes. So maybe it's a parents.com. Maybe it's a, Mashable. Maybe it's an InStyle.com. Maybe you want to give tips on the Every Girl. Like there's so many, in essence, there's so many places, but figure out where and then the who, right? So you're figuring out, what do I have to offer? Where do I belong? Who's covering me there? And then here's what I want to show you, like, and then we'll go to the next question, I'm sure. But like, I have not yet said once, like, send an email. Because the thing about PR is all the real work is before the relationship building, the research, the writing a really strategic email. The pressing send on an email pitch is like the finale of your work. Like your child could press send on an email that you schedule. So again, what do I have to offer? Where do I belong? Who is covering stories like me where I belong? And then let me create a really strategic pitch that can easily be taught to you so I can consistently get into a flow. So you're not sending one pitch and you're like, I'm famous, Oprah, I'm here. You're sending like a pitch every month and you're getting into a flow. So that's like a basic, I know that was a lot, but that's like an overview of, if you can conceptualize those things, which I think we can, we explained it in like a few minutes, you can begin getting press for your business. We don't need to overthink it. My first PR boss said to me, Sabina, it's PR, not ER. Like, chill out about it. And it's true.
I love that. Yeah, it's a good way to think about it. And just as a AV thing, there's like, is your mic kind of near where your hands are? Because I'm hearing a little bit of noise every once in a while.
I moved it. I had a little piece of paper on my computer. Let me know if that's a little better.
It probably should be better now, but like it felt like a record scratch. I was like, oh, what's she gonna say now? But I think we're past that. Yeah, I mean, I like the fact that we're talking about, first of all, where do you want to be known? Because sometimes people will reach out to me and say, hey, Terry, can you get me an entrepreneur magazine? And let's pretend they have like some kind of gadget that helps you like water your lawn. I'm like, you're better off being in a trade magazine as opposed to, entrepreneur, because entrepreneur is about solving problems for people. And even that, when people pitch me, they're like, oh, I've done all this cool stuff. Look at me, look at me. And I'm like, I don't care about you or your company. I care about my audience. And if you don't have content that's going to help my audience, it's not going to fit. So I think doing that on
the person and the outlet and the context, right? Like not every story is going to connect to every outlet.
Yeah. And the last thing I would say is your point about making a list is super valuable. And what I would suggest is making a list of these outlets you want to be in, and then just following people that write for these outlets in an organic way. Because often when I'm thinking about a story and I'm trying to find someone to mention it, it's someone I already know because I'm connected for one reason or another. We don't have to be friends, but if I realize, wow, you're often talking about X, Y, Z, I'm just going to go to you directly, and therefore that's the best way to build it. It's going to take time, but you'll be top of mind when I need someone who's an expert in X, Y, or Z.
Oh, for sure. And can I add to that? Like also, because I think people, especially small business owners, we want press, right? So we're thinking, okay, everyone says I should be an entrepreneur. I'll say entrepreneur. I guess I should be in Inc. I guess I should be on the Today Show. I guess I should be in Oprah magazine. Like, these are the things we hear constantly as people's dreams. But you really need to understand that the media landscape is rapidly changing. There are so many homes for your stories and places your audience is. So first of all, you got to get in there, like get into that media space and start looking at the places you can be. We think it's so much hard work and we're putting in time, but that is going to cut your time to get to the press down so much faster. Those relationships will get you faster. And then another thing I wanted to add on, when Terry says people come to him and they're like, I want to be an entrepreneur, like our mutual friend, Joelle, everyone's like, I want to be on the Today Show. And it's like, that's a vast place. Like, there are multiple hours in the Today Show. They service different kinds of businesses and different kinds of stories. There's a huge magazine and website to entrepreneur. There's different kinds of people covering different kinds of stories. So really look within those places to see who you really belong with and where you belong. And though it takes a little work on the back end, it's going to get you there so much faster.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny. I'm thinking about this one person as you were talking that pitched me. And she pitched one angle, and I was like, cool, I don't cover that. And then she pitched like a completely different angle about like some like financial issue that her family was having with like an ex-wife or whatever. And I'm like, are you just throwing like random stuff at the wall, like trying to get lucky here? And
you, Terry, anything.
yeah, and I was like, I'm like, go hire someone for PR, because like you shouldn't be doing it yourself. But so kind of along those lines, I mean, what story should you tell about yourself? And obviously you want to have different angles, but and again, for me, it's like, are you going to solve a problem for my audience? But it depends on the outlet. So what are some stories that you should tell about yourself where it provides value to the media outlet?
Exactly. So first, let's talk about actually telling the story of yourself. And again, like we alluded to in the beginning, your story isn't I'm a small business owner, or I'm an entrepreneur, or I'm an expert. Like, none of those things are actually stories for you. So what you really want to be talking about are like things our mutual friend Patrice calls a founder's fire. I like to call it like your big, wonderful why. But when you think about your business, it's like not like I heard this great example once, like not I make pizza. This is how I make the pizza. This is who I make the pizza with. This is the dough I make the pizza. This is the family recipe. So all these stories that actually make up the who and the how and the why behind your business. Perhaps there's a transformational moment. I used to be an investment maker. Now I make granola. That's actually a true story I heard recently that got lots of press. Like, I used to be a high school teacher. Now I teach entrepreneurs how to get their own press. So everyone has a little bit of transformation. Often if you're a small business owner, there's that transformation. I was doing that and this. So again, these are stories of value, not just like do a commercial about my business. Can you tie your business to something timely or a news topic that everyone's talking about? Maybe it's the great resignation that became the great regret, and you're helping people find your way out of that. And then finally, so those are like some quick story angles, but I really also wanted to say, like, if you're an expert listening right now, like Terry is an expert, often service providers, you are experts, right? So another thing I like to do is have some go-to story angles that I think people go crazy to about for experts. And I actually wrote a couple down I wanted to share with you all because we're here and Terry's got a great audience. So here are some like quickies. You're like, what's an angle someone's going to get into for my story beyond just your story itself, right? So an easy one is help people prevent mistakes. How can you and your business and your expertise help someone prevent mistakes? It's my biggest win with the press all the time. Like, 4 fashion mistakes women are making this summer and how to prevent them. 5 mistakes business owners make that cost them big money and how you as an expert can prevent them. So to me, that's like a big story angle that also works. And also another, like, and any brand can use it. Another big win I love to suggest is like, what to do before you fill in the blanks. Like, what to do before you go on your next date with an online suitor, what to do before you go on your next grocery trip to save you money, what to do before your next pitch presentation to make sure it's a winning presentation. Like, all of those things are story angles that you can replicate. But whether you're telling a story about yourself or sharing expertise, what you're doing is giving value. And so, like Terry said before, it's like, what can you do to give value to these news sources? And I like hooks like that because you can make them work for different publications with the different kinds of value. So those are some stories that I feel like can really quickly catch the media's eye that some of you listening to right now, I hope, can actually take and run with.
And speaking of that, if you were not taking notes, just like I wasn't, you can always go to my website, and Megan, who's on right now, it has some really great show notes for you because I was like trying to mentally take notes so I could have a good reply, but there was a lot. So
I was
all good
like, I'm
information.
gonna give you some salt. Like, people like give some expert tips or tell a transformation story, which is all great, but you're like, well, what is that gonna look like? And I wanted to give you some of my like go-tos because like the press want to use what works. I have used the same kind of hooks with different kind of filler, so to speak, in them for a long time, and they work repeatedly over and over again. So I'm gonna pass that magic along to you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's funny. I was talking to this guy. I want to get his name right. Cliff Kennedy yesterday, and he's the CEO of a company called Frios Pops. So they make frozen pops or whatever.
Cool.
And it's a mobile franchise that he owns. And the way that he started this company is he was driving one day, got stuck in traffic, was really hungry, stopped at one of these trucks, got one of these pops, loved it so much that he bought a franchise, loved that so much that he bought the whole franchise organization. So I'm like,
That's
that
me.
alone is a story, but
Yeah.
there's another story within the story because his family comes from the oil business. That's what his grandfather started, his father started, and he left that because he wanted to go into this
Mm.
frozen treat business. So there's a story about just really following your passion and maybe having some issues with your family not understanding, so on and so forth, but still going for it.
Yes.
And he was just a nice guy in general too. So I'm talking to him like there's so many angles that came out of like this 5 minutes of talking to him. But I think sometimes we don't realize that we have these stories to be told because we're used to telling our own story. So it's like, oh, no one else had this problem.
Mm.
Well, yeah, I mean, other people do, and you've navigated successfully. So how about you share it? And that's what makes it a good story.
By the way, I love that it's sort of like meet the man who went for a popsicle and ended up buying the entire popsicle company. And by the way, I feel like you're saying all of us, we wonder like, do I have a story? Short answer, trust Terry and I, the answer is yes. But one thing I like to do for people is have them play that sort of fill in the blank, like meet the local business owner who, meet the local mom who started a like everyone's favorite new parenting blog, meet the local fitness pro who started the goat Pilates trend, like whatever it is. And know that you don't have to have some kind of wild story. You don't have to buy the popsicle company or the franchise. You can be doing something locally where you are, but it's the story that's going to connect people to you. And it's sometimes easier to connect to a regular story as opposed to like, I lost my legs and then I did this, then I did that, and now I run a business. So trust that your story, just because of the way you tell it and what's happened, is going to connect with someone and give them permission to do something in their life. But yeah, we're so used to what we're doing. We see the messy part of our business and we forget that that's like a good story too.
One thing that you mentioned that I think bears repeating is you have a good story and tell it and find it, but what you don't want to do is what we call story inflation because you're trying to make it seem like it's bigger than it is. So if you're like, oh, I have this new company, we did $1 million in revenue next year, we're the next unicorn. I'm like, you realize a unicorn's $1 billion, right? So like, just say you started a company, with a loan you got from your uncle, and here's where it goes. Like that might be cool too. But when you're inflating things like that and trying to like trick me into thinking I care when maybe I shouldn't, you've lost all trust. So I think if you just have like the meat of it down and have a good angle, like I love like meet the guy who stopped for a frozen treat and bought the whole thing. That's real. He doesn't have to say how much money he's making. He's just saying I literally was stuck in traffic and was hungry and now I own this thing. So
right. And
I mean,
to add to that, Terry, and this is like PR inside baseball, but a lot of publications and will now ask for proof. So if you're like, I went from making cupcakes in my living room to a $2 million business in the pandemic, they'll be like, show me the money, show me the paperwork. And I have had to like walk multiple small biz owners through the process of sharing their tax returns for stories for Forbes, Business Insider, other places. So you can't just be like, it used to be sort of, you could say anything and people be like, okay, we believe you, but that's not like that anymore. And again, it doesn't have to be, because people just want to know. Remember the famous Oprah interview with Sarah Blakely? She they said, we want to see your staff. And she's like, it's the local FedEx guy and my grandma. Like, I'm working in my living room, you guys. And they're like, all right, so it is. That's your office. And that is what is like the folklore of her story right now, right? So your story where it begins is magical, actually.
Yeah, I'd agree. And so, I mean, some people are listening are like, okay, cool, awesome. Like, how do I get this done quickly, right? I'm short
Right?
on time and I really need a pop for my business. what's the and I never want to look for hacks because hacks
Yeah.
normally aren't sustainable, but what's the fastest way to get press for your business?
Okay, so the fastest way, and I agree, like especially press, you have to be in it sort of for the long game because again, you can bang out a quick hit, but then you really are like, there was once a song called Informer, and it was back in the day by some guy named thing like Snow. Anyways, my point is, you don't know who I'm talking about because he's like a one-hit wonder that you only knew if you were like a child of the 80s and 90s, like in high school, the 90s. That's my point. You don't want one hit. So you want consistent press. So what do you need to do? You need to stop thinking I'm just going to like vomit out emails to everybody and drive myself crazy. And instead, I just want you to just stop doing anything but focus on looking for places you belong, popping them in that media list you're going to create after talking to Terry and I today, and then relationship building with people who are covering the content that you seek. You're going to be reading their stories and you're going to be complimenting them and engaging with them. And as you do those two things that are actually sort of pleasurable to do as an entrepreneur, like read some content that's interesting, look at your local news, read a magazine. As you're doing that, like the paths to your press are going to start appearing, the places you belong are going to start coming to you. So the first thing is just like invest more time than anything in relationships and like researching that content. Just spend your time doing that. And then pick some stories out to consistently, like once a month, dedicate. I'm going to send a pitch out once a month. And I know that sounds like a lot, but it's one email. Pitching is just business email. Let's not over get in our heads. So can you send one business email and a follow-up about your business every month? Yeah, I think you can. I think you can. So that's all we want from you is just the basics. And we're going to give you, before you leave today, like 3 of my favorite story wins in terms of landing these kinds of stories. So we'll help you out there.
Awesome. I mean, here's one take I would have on this too, how to get press. I think when people get press, it's because they want to look significant. And I think instead of pursuing significance, you should do something significant first and then get loud about it on your own channel. So what I would say is whatever story you have, whatever angle it is, cool. Talk about it on Instagram, talk about it on LinkedIn, so on and so forth. Because then when someone does research on you, even if you have a crappy pitch or they don't really get it yet, if they go to your profile, like, oh, wow, this person actually is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So on my end, I told a story a few years ago at the height of the pandemic, if that's even a time period, about how I got laid off in 2009, I think it was. And I got a $40,000 raise after being out of business or out of work for 5 months. Multiple outlets reached out to me saying, "Oh, Terry, gosh, this is such a timely story. Can you tell it for this podcast, this newspaper?" Even my college that I went to did a feature on me. So what I would say to people is like, "Yeah, sure, pitch, awesome, whatever, do your thing, right?" But if you can't show up consistently to tell this story, you really only have one shot, and it's that email that you might have messed up in because I have typos all the time. So if you want to pursue significance, then do something significant that people will reach out to you. Or what you could also do is instead of going one to one with your pitches, it's more of a many to many, where many people enjoy telling other people about you, and that's how you get discovered as well.
People find you, like the press are just like us. My husband used to be a newspaper editor in New York City, and he's consuming massive amounts of media all the time, reading about cool people, looking on Instagram, what's trending on TikTok, what's this person doing here, like that's what they're consuming all the time. And when you said something, Terry, I also wanted to piggyback on what you said, like do something significant. Also, if you want to be someone who the press come to, be of value. Like this whole relationship with the press is being of value to them. How can I provide them expert advice? How can I provide them insight into expanding on some stories everyone's already talking about? How can I give them a darn good story for their audience? Because the press have to come to their bosses with good stories consistently to share. So keep saying, like, how can I be of value to this specific person and what his or her needs are? And slowly that expands. But again, like all of this can feel really daunting until you start doing it. Like any task, and Terry's a performance guy, but I feel like any task is way harder in our head than we start executing and learning and figuring it out. But the act of just hearing about it and deciding what it's going to be for you in your business isn't going to get you where you need to be.
Yeah. So you mentioned being of value to your to the press, and I took like one PR class when I was in business school, or maybe undergrad, I can remember. But I learned about a site called HARO, Help a Reporter Out.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, can you explain what that is, and does it make sense to be on platforms where journalists are supposedly looking for people to contribute to stories?
Yes, that's a great question, because I like will answer that differently now than I would answer it like 5 or 10 years ago. Because HARO and Helper is called Helper Reporter Out. It's been around for eons, right? It's been for ages. So back in the day, it was like a new thing, and there'd be handfuls of PR people and small businesses on it, and it's every day churning out PR opportunities from the media. But I'm going to say this because it's my job to be straight honest with all of you as well. It has become something that is less policed, and it could be people trying to get paid opportunities from you, random people blogging in their basement who are like, hey, send me your products and stuff. So you have to be discerning there about the opportunities you're going to spend your time, because time is money, pursuing. You also have to think there are thousands or more people all pitching these opportunities at the same time. So number one, there are some challenges there, but it still gives you a couple things: access to PR opportunities you'd never have any other way. Also a visual of what stories the press are finding interesting. Looking at what stories are bubbling up in the press, you're like, this is what matters to people right now. This is the timeline they're on. These are some people in the press that matter. So I would say go in there, do it with a discerning eye, knowing not every press opportunity has to be answered. Like, you don't have to say yes to the invitation of every party you get invited to. And know that a lot of people are going to respond. So not getting a response is normal. And it's just competitive, right? Because everyone's reacting to an opportunity. Something I'd like to give you to chew on instead would be like the advent or the use of Substacks by reporters, like Substack emails, which are, reporters are just sending out their emails out requesting story stuff. So massive amounts of reporters, Today's Show, like high quality, real simple, loads of them are now using free emails you can sign up through Substack, and they will request things. So often if there's a freelancer, they're probably on Substack, and then they're going to sometimes daily, sometimes weekly request sources, experts. I saw someone from People Magazine sourcing the other day, New York Times, AARP, Wall Street Journal. So that I would do some research into. And like, we're a Google University world. You can track down who has a Substack, who's a reporter pretty quickly. They want stories, and that's going to be fed to you. So I'd also throw that idea out to people as well.
Another great tip. One other thing I would mention, I'm sure you're, a pro this too, is actually having a personalized pitch. So on my end, when someone reaches out and says, hey, Terry, I see you wrote an article about this. I have something similar, whether it's for the similar audience or it's a similar product or a tool, whatever, you're going to get a response from me. But if you're like, hey, Terry, I have this new thing. It's this app that helps you find your left shoe. I'm like, when did I ever talk about apps and left shoes, right? So I would say, going back to what you said earlier, Sabina, you're better off sending off 1 or 2 pitches per month as opposed to just like throwing stuff at the wall. Because if someone sends me a very thoughtful pitch, maybe I don't care about it, but I can pass it on to someone internally who might. And or if they pitch me again, I'm like, okay, they're not just making stuff up as we go along. So I'm having a lot of questions here. I want to make sure that we stop and say, if anyone else has questions, give me 1 second. Please do go ahead and enter them in the chat window. Happy to answer them. So any questions about how to get press, how to respond to any kind of press outreach you're getting, floor is yours. We want to make sure we answer your questions here, as well as having this dialogue here. Yeah, go ahead, Sabina.
Oh, I was just going to say really quickly, when I say send one pitch, you guys, I don't mean like one physical person. I mean one angle. So like 4 fashion mistakes everyone will make this summer. You're going to send that to like 20 different people, right? Who might be interested in that, but like one angle of a pitch. But again, yes, all possible. And like, throw those questions at us. Awesome.
But you did hint at, I think it was like 3 story frameworks that we must know. So let's go ahead and cover those too, because I don't want to forget about that.
Yeah. And this is, again, like we've alluded to a couple of these already, but if you're like, I want to get press now, Sabina, I want to go to my local ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox. That's a great place to start. Start local, right? It's easy, low lift. And I want to practice being a TV star locally. Because then if you can draw a small circle, you can draw a big circle. So you can go national after that or do whatever else. So what I would say is there's 3 different stories that are going to move you fastest. Number 1 is that your founder story. That's a great one to pitch locally. But again, you're going to lean into things like your transformation, the why, the how, the pieces about it. So it turns it into a story. So your founder story to local news is a big win right now. I would encourage you to work on that. Number 2, I would encourage people Another story that's going to book faster is leaning into your expert tips. So your expertise can be, it's like the back door into the press. It's the fastest way. You're giving value, you're giving expertise. You're not promoting your business directly, but your business is right there with you as you deliver expert tips. You're asking yourself, what tips can I deliver as the expert from my industry that I'm from? Or what tips can I give just anecdotally? I'm running a business as a busy parent. I am working from home. I'm working with my spouse. So what can you give that way? So expert tips, another fast win in terms of getting the press. And the final little quickie, I would say a framework I'd love you all to consider is piggybacking on news stories that are popping right now. So anything the news wants to talk about, they will want to talk about over and over and over again. J-Lo and Ben get back together. We're not going to stop talking about that until they have a baby or something. So what can you be a relationship expert talking about? Should you get together with your ex? Are you a wedding planning expert who's going to talk about what their wedding is going to be like? So again, piggybacking on news stories, relationship, like, family counselors, what are their kids going to think being, reunited? So piggybacking on news stories is going to get you the fastest entry into the press because they're talking about these stories in real time. So if you can add to the conversation, you're going to get yourself and your business into that story faster. So that's these the fastest ways to get in the door press wise.
It's funny. I didn't really think about that, but it does work, right? So I don't want to name any inciting incidents because they might be negative. It's like someone's like, here's my take on this. This is why that person got so angry. Here's why this is so important. But yeah, you're right. They're just using that as this momentum to piggyback on. And I like what you said earlier about being an expert, right? So I could say here's my life as a busy working dad who has 4 kids, or I can say, look, I want to do a series of tips for how other people can quit their 9 to 5 and start a professional service business with 0 money down using the skills they already have. That way I'm showing up week after week after week after week. And I think that's where people sometimes miss out because they're like, oh, I just want to tell my story. It's like, well, how about you help other people transform and provide ongoing value? And then from there, you can just keep on getting more spots. So another thing that I think, and I wasn't prepared for this either, is what to do after you are featured by the press. Because a couple of years ago, I was on Good Morning America, which I understand is a hard spot to get. But I'm on Good Morning America talking about social media marketing or whatever it was. And I had a lot of people just reaching out to me afterwards saying, can you talk about this? Can you talk about that? And I wasn't prepared to absorb that much attention. I also wasn't prepared to repurpose this content on other social media channels. So I don't want to say it was a wasted opportunity because I learned something from it. But once we get press, what should be the next thing that we do?
Great question. So what you said was right. The first thing, even when press is coming, if you do, you want to stage yourself for success. So making sure whenever I'm about to do an interview or be in the news, I make sure my social stuff is all staged the way I want. So when Discover It, I can make sure I have my website set up to capture emails, all the things I want to do, knowing that's coming. So stage yourself. And then, you want to leverage it. So some quick checklist items yes, you thank the reporter who did the story for you. No, you don't have to give them a gift or ice cream or product. They can't even accept it legally most of the time. So you thank them privately, but you also thank them publicly by sharing your opportunity, your press moment on all your social platforms and LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, because they need those shares. They want their content to be clicked and to grow. So you share it everywhere. And then you remember to future share it, do a schedule throwback Thursday posts to celebrate that. Not everyone was watching Terry on Good Morning America the moment it was happening, even though millions were. So he's going to make sure that's an ongoing Facebook ad, or that's something in an Instagram throwback Thursday where he shares it some more. And then, like you said, yes, socially, you want to share it on social media. You want to have it on your blog, in your newsletter. You want that stuff to live on your website, not just on the as seen in bar that goes across your site, but maybe on the sales page. If someone can buy consulting with you, on that sales page, it should also say as seen on Good Morning America and stuff. So all those steps to me saying yes to you are being validated by this press you're sharing. Something I want to tell everybody that they have to remember when we're sharing our press, though we're thrilled, oh my God, I was on Good Morning America, watch it here. Remember, not everyone else is I can't wait to take 10 minutes out of my day to watch Terry. So when we're sharing this, it's not just I got press, here it is. It's saying, come watch me when I share 3 secrets, to da-da-da on Good Morning America. I'm going to reveal this. And then let me tell you this, when you do your newsletter and your blog, you want to tempt people to engage in that even more. So you're going to say, come to my blog. I'm going to share 2 more extra tips. I'm going to show you behind the scenes footage of me at Good Morning America getting ready. I'm going to tell you some stuff I didn't tell anyone else about this experience. So again, leverage that in so many ways that one experience for 3 minutes has become like so much content for you that builds authority and trust, and people saying, damn, he was on Good Morning America. Did you see that on his blog and in his newsletter and on Instagram and like everywhere, right? All those things.
Well, no one saw it in any of those places because I didn't do that. So I messed that up. But yeah, I'm gonna do that. But I know you help people get press for themselves as opposed to going through a PR agency. And on my end, I'm normally more likely to respond to a pitch from an individual versus as an agency because I know I'm just like another person they're sending it out to. But do you mind sharing an example of someone who you worked with and who was able to successfully pitch themselves to a brand and any kind of outcomes from that as well?
Oh my gosh, like all day long. So yeah, my job is teaching small business owners how to pitch themselves. So I'll throw out top of my head, I was using that J-Lo thing because it's real. There's a relationship expert named Lily Womble, best name ever, Southern girl based in New York City, who started piggybacking on all these J-Lo stories and tying them into news stories. And she's been on multiple New York City news shows. They've now given her a regular beat, a monthly relationship beat on it. True story. There's a woman named Maria who has a company called In Kind Boxes, who told her story all the way to Good Morning America. Again, a story she told. There is a woman named Nadia Murdoch who's a fitness expert who saw some people doing body shaming of actresses, and she pitched some expert advice on getting over body shaming, landed it in a news story within, I'd say, minutes of her pitching it. So again, these are all people, because once you sort of know, this is what I have to offer, this is what a basic email pitch should look like, which you can all be taught how to do that. It's like, this is how you write an email. And then you're just starting to execute. It becomes this empowering thing. You're like, I can do this. Like, I can literally do this for my brand. And then on a very basic level, if you're a product person out there, all day long, I hear about small biz product makers landing their products in gift guides and story places, because that is like very straight up easy PR once you learn it. That is just creating product pitches about your business and sending it to places that just cover product. There's no story involved. It's just like, how much does it cost? Is it pretty? So again, that stuff you can turn into a flow, and they're getting themselves in gift guides all the time. So, oh my gosh, yes, like it is 100% a possibility. And I'm surrounded by it all day long.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate everything you've shared with us today, including that last flurry of real stories. But where can people learn more about you, your organization? What's the best way to follow up?
Okay, so pressforsuccess.com is my website. That is an education platform and community where we teach you how to do all the things you need to do to get press and have a good time doing it. And then on Instagram at Sabina Knows, Knows, and my name's Sabina, you'll find me talking about all things PR all the time. I'll answer questions, and I will make you believe you can do it.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, and everyone listening. As a reminder, all those show notes will be on my website. There was so much that you shared that, again, I couldn't write down. But we appreciate your time, and we're all going to go to your website, learn more about you, get some more information. So thank you for that, and
Yes.
look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you all. Talk to y'all soon.
Take care.
Bye.